Trump unleashes tariffs. Trump's trade war on foreign scavengers. Stocks decline as trade war escalates. Trump announces 26% tariffs on India. What's happening all over the world, or in particular around the global trade market? How is Trump's policy affecting or causing ripples all around the globe, and how does it affect different countries? What is the different tariff levies each country is facing, and how is it going to affect each one of us? Yes, this is a very heated topic and a very prominent discussion in the economic circle these days. So, why don't we go through this very quickly? Welcome to Nexus Point, connecting the dots. Donald Trump, in his second term as presidency, has announced a more protectionist regime for Americans. His slogan of America First in turn means that other economies all over the world need to pay more to trade with the Americans. So, how does Trump's tariff policies and trade policies affect the economies all over the world and the global market? Here's a quick outline. First, let's see how America's trade policies affect its neighboring countries, Canada and Mexico. Both these countries in February 2025 were charged with a tariff levy of 25%. Under the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, some of the goods were exempted from tariffs, but there was universal tariffs on some products like steel, aluminium and automotive products. But this August we have seen that Canada is facing a tariff of 35%. However, Mexico has got a little breathing space. Mexico has got a time period of 90 days within which it has to agree with Trump on a deal, or else it will face a tariff levy ranging from 25 to 30% on its products. It's not yet clear whether the goods included in US-Mexico-Canada agreement will come under these tariffs or will they be exempted. This remains to be seen in the coming days. Of course, both these countries have registered their protests against America. So why does Trump enforce this tariff levy on its neighboring countries? It's not just about trade. Trump has given multiple reasons why he wants to levy a tariff on these countries. What are they? Let's see it out. First of all, Trump cites border security, human trafficking and illegal immigration as a prime cause for levying these tariffs. Both these borders, as we know, are having a huge influx of immigrants into America, and Trump strongly believes that the illegal immigrants are eating away Americans' hard-earned money. So, especially in the case of Mexico, Trump wants to enforce a strict tariff rule so that these countries will be pressurized to enforce a stricter regime or stricter rules for immigration purposes. Secondly, the opioid or drug menace that is plaguing the American society, especially the influx of fentanyl in the country through cross-border, is very rampant. To put a check on this drug crisis, Trump has used tariff as a tool. Also, we can see that the trade deficit of both these countries with the US is very huge. To balance these trade imbalances, Trump has used tariffs. Obviously, the main reason is the import of oil for the US economy. Trump is also planning to incentivize domestic production by making the imports costlier, so that the Americans will opt for more American products and thus create more jobs for the Americans. So, I think it is similar to our Make in India and Skill India program, where we are giving more boost to the domestic people by making sure that the foreign goods are set at a higher price. And last but not the least, Trump is using tariff as a powerful tool for negotiation. Yes, he is making exorbitant rates of tariffs across the countries so that they will be forced to make a deal with the US government, and which in turn will be favorable for the US. Take the European Union. The European Union, before brokering a trade with the US, was facing a tariff levy of 30%. But after brokering the deal, the transatlantic nations now have a baseline levy of 15% on all its imports, which includes cars, pharmaceutical products and semiconductors. As a whole, this deal is a bad deal for the European Union because apart from this levy, it is also committed to buy 600 billion worth of additional investments and $750 billion of energy imports from the US. Taking an exception to this, the United Kingdom has a more isolationist approach from Trump. The UK or the British economy faces a 10% levy on all its goods imports, which in turn means that the GDP of the United Kingdom will be affected by 0.7%. Considering the whole situation, we can say that this is not a brilliant deal, but not a worse one either. And how does Trump affect the Southeast Asian countries? Trump's policy on the Southeast Asian countries have affected different segments like the textile, agriculture, automobiles and electronic industry. Considering the diverse portfolio, the impact has been industry specific and the impact on any country can be considered not a big huge impact. However, we can see that some of these countries have been vastly affected. For instance, Vietnam will face a loss of $30 billion, which will lead to a GDP contraction of up to 2%. But some other countries like Thailand and Malaysia have been able to get a favorable deal from the US. Overall, we can see that the Southeast Asian countries will face a tariff ranging from 10 to 40%. Of course, it will be varied according to the industries. And there is a probability that in the coming days, these tariff rates might go lower after brokering the deal with the US government. Meanwhile, the Southeast Asian countries are also trying to lessen their demand for exports to the US market. They are looking for newer markets so that instead of selling their products for a very high rate in the American market, they can sell it in some other place. But like in other countries, Trump's policy is not just limited to the economic sphere. It has political aspect also. How? Yes, Trump's policy has some political ripples in the Southeast Asian countries. ASEAN, which is considered as a major grouping and a strong force in this region, has failed to take up the leadership responsibility during this time. We can see that ASEAN has not made any commitment or comments on this trade war. So, instead of standing for its own people, ASEAN has left a lacuna in the region. We can see that China will try to take this opportunity to gain more access in this market and create a bigger influence in the region. China, which is already very much interested in the Southeast Asian regions, has got a very good opportunity with the US trying to alienate themselves from the Southeast markets. So, we can see that there will be now two global players entering in the Southeast Asian market. And we can also see that US has indirectly asked these countries to fight against each other. By pitting these countries against each other to get a more favorable deal from the US, each one has to look for its own and not stand up for the group as a whole. Now, let's move on to the next country. Coming to the eastern part of the globe, Chinese economy has seen a more confrontational approach from US President. At one point of time, these hostilities extended to the point that China faced a tariff levy of 145% from the US. Of course, China also retaliated. But after the discussions in May, the US has levied a tariff of 30% on Chinese products, and in turn, China has levied a 10% tariff on American products. We can see that over a period of time, the Chinese goods have steadily declined in the US market, and also the Chinese are looking for new markets that will help them overcome this trade crisis and evade the taxes imposed by the new president. But China and America are not just at war in the trade field. China is an emerging superpower and the US government is not appreciating it. the US government is focusing to restrict China's access to the US technology, citing the security concerns and IP thefts. In turn, China has also a lot of grudges against America. China is concerned about America's support for Taiwan, and also US has openly criticized China for its human rights approach towards the Uyghur Muslims. And we can also see that America has started playing a more active role in the South China Sea, which the Chinese claim as their own sovereign territory. So overall we can see that the war between China and America is being fought at multiple levels. But we can say that with Trump being more focused on America first and concerned about the domestic markets, China might try to enter the vacuum created by America and try to emerge as a global player in the market. Now, let's check what is happening with Trump's trade policies on our own economy. Yes, how does Indian markets approach these trade tariffs? We can see that Trump has imposed a 25% tax levy on the Indian market, which is a minuscule reduction from the earlier said 26%. We can see that Trump wants to see India in a developing nation status than a developed nation status. Also, Trump has said that Indian market should be open to the US products like dairy, poultry, soybeans, nuts, and wheat, rice and other agricultural products. Of course, with our economy, we need to approach with a more protectionist measure to protect the domestic markets, which does not suit Trump well. India's top 5 exports to the US in 2025. What are those? Let's check it out. India has imported these items from most. One is electrical machinery. Then comes pharmaceutical products. Then nuclear machinery, pearls and precious stones, and then mineral fuels. So, we can assume that these 5 markets will take a hit from these tariff levies and the tax policies of the US government. Also, the Indian government and the Indian market as a whole needs to take a more braver approach to face the changing global trade patterns. We can see that even though Trump has supported India on many occasions, coming to the trade war, Trump wants to see India as a developing nation rather than a developed nation. Trump has also accused the BRICS of being anti-American. India is already having a huge trade deficit with US, and the US government has also said that India will face a penalty for its import of energy and military from Russia, its very high tariff barriers and non-monetary trade barriers according to the President Trump. So, even though we tried to broker a deal with the Americans and we started off early, the slow pace with which this deal was progressing has in fact frustrated the American policymakers according to the US agencies. So, instead of getting a better deal, we have to be satisfied with the 25% tariff levied on the Indian market. But, on the other hand, what has come as a big blow is the fact that Pakistan has managed to broker a deal with 19% tax tariffs. So we can see that our neighboring country has tried to broker a better deal with the US government. Considering Trump's global presence and his involvement in all the country politics, Pakistan is trying to be in good books with the president. India needs to approach more cautiously with the Americans and also has to make a steady balance between the US and the Russian governments. But at the same time, India is also committed to protecting its own market, economy and the people. So, we can say that Trump's policy is not much favorable for the Indian economy. Let's see what changes in the coming days. So, I hope you have got a very quick glimpse of how US government has created a very big and impactful change in the global market and all over the world. Not just economically, but also in the political sphere. We have seen the US-Canada deals, US-Mexico deals, how US and transatlantic nations will fare, how US-UK relationships will change. We have seen how US is impacting the Eastern world, including China, Southeast Asian countries, and our own economy. So, what lies in the future for the global markets? We'll have to wait and see with our fingers crossed. Let's hope that we are able to get a better deal from the US government, and let's also hope that India, instead of depending too much on any country, becomes self-reliant so that instead of others dictating terms for us, we can dictate what is best for us in our own terms. So, I hope you like this video. Please do like, share and subscribe. Bye-bye. See you.